He was labelled the best in the world at 12 years old, a tennis prodigy bound for greatness, striving alongside a father who was obsessed with his success. Todd describes his younger years as Groundhog Day, an endless 24-hour cycle hell-bent on high performance in which every tiny detail was put under constant scrutiny. After many years of knowing no other way to live, Todd hit a wall and had the realisation he was done with the sport that had made him a machine. He soon spiralled into self-destruction, trying to annihilate the identity he couldn't stand. Todd's 20s were a blur dominated by alcoholism, with drinking becoming a foundation of the next chapter of his complicated relationship with his father. Eventually, Todd got sober and has managed to stay that way for 5 years, thanks in part to the environment provided by Alcoholics Anonymous. He doesn't have the answers and he hates the idea of telling anyone else how to fix their problems. What he does have to share is a real experience and he'll give it to you straight. This is Todd Ley.
Welcome to Young Blood, the volunteer video podcast dedicated to young men's mental health. I'm your host, Cal McPherson, and this is a platform for young men and their loved ones to share lived experience stories and show that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Suicide is the #1 killer of young people, and changing that starts with speaking up. So let's do it. This show touches on some tough topics that may provoke strong emotions. If you find anything in this chat distressing, please do whatever you need to do to look after yourself.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Credit Union SA and Bernie Lewis Home Loans, two South Australian businesses that believe in the value of raising mental health awareness, working together to help save lives. Improving the mental health of our communities is a complex challenge that calls for speaking up and taking action, and sharing lived experience stories is a major part of making positive change. We couldn't bring you these podcasts without their support. Todd, what's your earliest memory of being pushed to succeed?
What's my earliest memory of being pushed to succeed? I don't know. Just off the top of my head, I remember I'd wake up in the morning to my dad coming in my room, opening the blinds, singing that Cat Stevens song, that Morning Is Broken song. And he'd sort of like shove a poorly spread like Vegemite and toast in front of my face, and then he would sort of shower first and then stumble out of the shower sort of like half naked, and he'd leave the shower running, so it sort of incentivized me to get out because I was still in bed. So there's that, because the shower, it's weird for someone to leave the shower running for you. It's like at least sort of have the decency to turn it off.
The obligation on you.
Yeah, it's like you are getting up. So there's that. But a lot of my life, especially my childhood, is like I've got snapshots of it. Most of it is just a blur. A lot of my life is actually a blur, to tell you the truth. A lot of my life, especially childhood, was very Groundhog Day-ish. It was rinse and repeat cycle where it was just same.
With tennis?
Yeah, always with tennis. And
tennis was the first thing that you were pushed into, that you were doing every day, or was there?
Yeah, no, it was tennis. Yeah. I mean, again, I don't know the full ins and outs of it, but like I got a racket and it wasn't like I was pushed. Like I obviously showed a knack for some ability to be able to do what I was doing. I used to hit the ball against the wall for hours, and it sort of helped in my house if you were busy because it was a unpredictable sort of landscape. And I had this sort of like endless amount of energy just to be able to do something, or like immersing myself in something and just getting completely fucking lost in it. So
unpredictable how?
Volatile.
Dad's temper? Yeah,
dad's temper. Yeah, mainly dad's temper, really. And again, like good and bad. Like huge, grandiose, charismatic character, and then at any second could just flip.
Yeah, so you're walking on eggshells.
Yeah, so it was just a bit like you didn't really know what was coming.
So if you're outside hitting the ball against the wall, it's kind of like you would be safe during that time.
If people were just busy and like no one was ever just really laying around. It was like if you were laying around, it was like, do something, like pick, you know what I mean? It was one of these houses where...
if you were laying around, what would you cop?
It's not what I would actually cop. It was more of there was a stigma surrounding laziness.
Okay.
There was a stigma there that was like, what do you think this is? Like a fucking free lunch? Like let's get going.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was always like stretching on a Swiss ball, doing a hand squeeze. If I was watching TV or if I ever watched sort of something, I was always, there was something attached to it. there was never just rest. I don't really know how to just rest and switch off.
Were you conscious of being on edge?
No, that was normal. That was just sort of my normal state of affairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what age did you get into tennis?
3.
Little racket or same size?
Nah, little racket. Yeah, 3.
And was your dad into tennis?
No, he was, at the time he was a real estate agent, but prior to that he was into racing greyhounds, like horse breeding. He trained like one of the fastest greyhounds in South Australia back in, I don't know, whenever the time he was. And yeah, he owned multiple race horses, he owned rib shops. He sort of just was off the beaten path. He wasn't your typical type of person. He didn't really have a normal bone in his body.
What were his priorities?
What were his priorities? That's a good question. What were his priorities? I think his priority was he was the provider at the time. So he was good at real estate. He was, I don't know, number 1 in South, something along those lines. And so he was providing for the family, but he didn't have much of he wasn't like a father. So he made up for it really with like sport was his way to be able to connect with his children. So his priorities were, I don't really know how to answer that. That's just what he was doing.
But his role as a father, he was putting food on the table, but then...
My mother worked as well, but it seemed like at the time he was bringing in more of the income, but that slowly changed later on in my life as he became more of like the coach towards my tennis. My mum did a lot of work.
But there wasn't the affection, nurturing side.
To my father? Oh, no. Nurturing, affectionate. Like, if you did well, there was like, you were hero worshipped.
Okay.
So you were put on a pedestal, like his greyhounds. Like, he idolized these things. And his brother Des, who he taught to become the longest kick in Australia, and he was like one of the first players ever to be drafted over to the America to punt for the NFL. I don't know, it's like the Rams or something. Yeah. And
so it
wasn't like affection, but there was like, you know, yeah.
But I guess putting you up on a pedestal when you achieved whatever it was, that just made the gap between success and failure that much wider, didn't it? Because showering you with love when you did the thing that you were supposed to do.
Yeah, there was winning, and then there was also when I sort of like beat myself mercilessly in the pursuit of excellence. Like that also won his applause. But yeah, it was always around the area of high performance, excellence, specialization, that type of stuff.
So he was very competitive because he loved competition, or because he wanted the spoils of it?
No, it was my father, again, to bring context to this, like you can't say everything at once in one sitting. So it's like, to bring context to him, like my father came up from like an animalistic childhood. He came from an alcoholic home. He was given away to people. He lived with people that made him sleep out in like, there was like chicken wire. And one of the only things that kept him basically feeling sane is thinking that later he'd come back in life and he'd come back and kill these people. There was all sorts of craziness happening within his family.
Did you know about that as a kid?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Because he wasn't the sort of person that kept anything from you. So he wasn't just my coach. He was like my best friend. He was like my warden. It was this whole bunch of... He was basically everything but a typical parent. And I did know about it. And there was something about him that I understood. I understood in a weird way what was going on with him, and how that there was certain things that were out of his control. He was powerless over certain things.
Do you remember having compassion for him from a young age? Did part of you feel sorry for him, or feel like you owed him something?
I definitely felt like I owed him something, but not compassion. Like I have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility for everything, and I think that's because a lot of stuff was put on my shoulders to sort of achieve or do. So I can take responsibility for everyone's feelings here in the room. No worries. But not compassion or empathy or anything like that. No.
So what were the expectations tennis-wise from the time you were looking like being a champion potentially, or being the best in the world when you were 12?
What were the expectations? There wasn't really any clear specific expectations or really any goals. I think I might have said on an interview once when I was on Today Tonight or A Current Affair or whatever that I wanted to be, somewhere by a certain time. But it was never like ever verbally stated by anyone else, you've got to be here by then or anything like that. It was just an accumulation of a lot of the hoorah and the noise that was happening around me, where because I was good and I was getting this sort of public attention and a lot of around the tennis traps. Like, it was well known that, you know, I was doing really well.
What were the expectations on you from your dad, though, that he would express or he wouldn't?
No, there wasn't any like verbal expectations. It wasn't like that. It was not verbally stated anyway. No.
What was it like?
What was what like?
Like what you received from your dad in terms of the pressure or that relationship when you were at that point in the tennis world?
It was sort of normal. It was normal because I'd always been under it. It was just the fact of knowing that, like, it never really ended. Nothing never really ended. It was always a to be continued. And it doesn't really matter whether I won or I lost. It was just continuous. It was a continual deep dive. He was an analyst. He could then, he just had a tennis obsession. His God was tennis. So it was just 24/7. That's really what it was. Yeah.
And that meant it was 24/7 for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Did you have any space to develop as a young person into a teenager, like start working out who you are at all, or was it just
24/7?
Yeah, okay.
24/7 means 20.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
So it wasn't weird or unique or strange or anything like that. It was just, that's what I did. That's how I lived. I was basically, you know, that was where I lived. That's where he lived, and everyone else around him sort of rode the ship and were forced to, you know, just endure that way of life. It was no, like, it's difficult to give an answer to that when that's just like been your environment.
What were the emotions that you had that were common? Like, did you experience feeling happy or satisfied?
Mainly disassociated, really,
Yeah.
looking back. Like, again, like I'm saying, a lot of the stuff was just a blur of just sort of being absent-minded, aloof. Again, feeling sense of responsibility for people that I shouldn't have been there. Yeah, just sort of living life on edge and constantly feeling watched and monitored and having, you know, again, like, imagine 24/7 someone coming around and following you today, and they're going to coach you on the most smallest and insignificant matters in your life, like how you're sitting right now, how you've just fucking combed your hair, how you're looking at me, how you're smiling right now. Like, just imagine that, right? 24/7 for 14 or 15 years. And you'll see what that does to a human being. I mean, I think there's sort of like certain camps where they, you know, like torture chambers where they basically just get certain sort of information and stuff in people's ears. They do that stuff to torture people. And I was a fucking child doing that. So, yeah, like, I mean, a lot of the conditions that I grew up in, it's like, you know, it's a sweatshop in a weird type of way. Not physically, but if you look at it from a different type of lens.
It felt like a factory, like wheels turning.
It was a factory. And sometimes I like the factory. And sometimes I want to go back to the factory now because that's where I live.
Consistent, what you knew.
That's what I know. So, you know, like, yeah.
Being followed around like that and having every little thing that you did scrutinise for so long. On reflection, how has that shaped you and what did you do?
I feel like people are constantly still surveilling me and monitoring me. I feel like I'm still scrutinised. Like, again, your mind just becomes an internalised society. So basically how I was conditioned is the conditioning that I have now. And that's the reason why I basically tried to break that conditioning and snap that off by, you know, doing all types of different things. And yeah, so it has an effect. It's had a lifelong effect.
What happened to the tennis career?
What happened? Well, it just ended. And there came a point internally, I guess you could say, where I was no longer okay with the circumstances in which we were just speaking about. Something within my soul said, that's enough, no more, which was news to me because I'd never had that conscious thought before in my life. So, and once that sort of entered, there was no undoing that. It didn't really matter how many times I went back to try and play tennis after that because I didn't, like I was saying before this, I didn't have any other skills.
It was hardwired.
But I mean, to play tennis, it was just, I didn't know what else to do without it once I stopped. So, but from that moment, something had internally shifted. And for me, you know, I had to, which I've written about in my book, I had to go to great lengths to be able to get out of the situation that I was in, to be able to go, that's enough. I needed to really put it to bed. And I did that via self-annihilation. I self-destructed and destroyed myself, which was a scary but cathartic process, because I was basically detonating this identity that had been created for me. And I did, and I very much have these self-destructive forces within me that I was able to tap into and then just basically smash the thing to bits. If you look at childhood stars, like in Hollywood and this type of stuff,
I don't do too well.
If you look at, it's a very similar type of thing to young tennis players. Now, a lot of those players don't necessarily make it to the big time, because if you can come back after that and sort of act a little, like acting's a bit of a different beast to tennis, where it's the dedication and discipline of it is immense. But yeah, it's a common theme what I'm speaking about here. It just happens to people in a different variety of ways. Some a little bit more extreme than others.
You're right. We do see again and again and again that child stars, be it sport or most notably Hollywood acting, that once they get to be teenagers or young adults, if they even get that far without taking their lives sometimes, that they're tortured, or that self-destruction is a huge element. Do you think it would be a similar story as for you, that it's about that identity piece and wanting to, being under scrutiny for so long?
Yeah, everything that basically I've just stated there, I've seen, especially in my field, that's been the very common occurrence with everyone else. I know in Hollywood, and I know in stuff, that's a similar thing. It's these parents become lost to their own children's potential. They start riding the ship. They start losing themselves to certain aspects.
And would they say that that's because they're just desperate for their kid to succeed because they want the best for their kid?
Well, anyone will say anything that comes out of their mouth that sounds nice, won't they?
They would actually believe that that's why they're doing it.
Oh, absolutely. People could believe that's red. Absolutely. I mean, to be able to delude yourself isn't a difficult thing to do. Of course, it's the perfect hiding spot to be able to hide behind a child and act like you're this altruistic, loving, involved parent, when really you're, people would never basically come to that realization. It's just, there's certain things that people are just not willing to accept and admit, really. And they hide behind certain things, and ultimately they're destructive. They can affect lives, and it happens time and time and time again.
And when your own experience, but then seeing that happen over and over, what do you get the feeling that those parents are getting out of it, like by fueling that or feeding that
life?
The vicarious thing.
Living vicariously through your children for stuff that basically you haven't lived up to in you missed out on as a kid. Thrill seeking. Like my dad, for example, wasn't necessarily that type. He was just the type of person that was an extreme individual that needed an extreme environment to be able to literally survive. So it didn't really interest him too much. I came to find this out later on in my life, but it was just he thrived in an environment that was extreme. That's where he felt.
So he kept creating those environments and putting himself in.
Exactly. Yeah, and sport and his son, being good at something was just, it was the perfect place to be able to, go insane. Yeah.
Do you remember that day when the switch flipped and you had that thought for the first time, or that physical feeling of, I want to get off this hamster wheel?
Do I remember it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty basic, like, in terms of, there was just, like, that stuff.
Were you playing at the time?
Yeah. I played a match, came into some pretty an unsavory welcome, to put it at the best. And it was embarrassing, it was humiliating, and for whatever reason, something inside of me basically just went, that's enough.
What was the process of explaining that to your dad and actually getting away from it?
What's the process of explaining that? I walked away in, it was Joplin in America, and there was a massive storm. And I walked around in the storm for about 11 hours, just figuring out what I was going to do. And there was a guy on the side of the road, and I bummed a cigarette with this guy on the side of the road. And there was a blackout, I remember. Yeah, I went in there, and I basically just kept repeating the same thing over and over again. So I'm done. I remember Dad was sitting on the edge of the bed. It was a bit like The Shining, that movie, where Jack Nicholson was sort of sitting on the edge of the bed. And the only light that I could see him in was when the lightning would sort of commence.
Couldn't have asked for a more ominous setting.
It seems like a fucking movie, but it was legit. And then I could see him sort of moving around the room just via the lightning. And yeah, it was, again, like, I'm very wary of doing this stuff because I know how lovely it is to be able to demonize certain people and go, here's the bad guy and this sort of stuff. So I get what we're doing here, but at the same time, like, yeah, I how do you say that?
Well, it's a lot more complex than that's the bad guy, though, isn't it?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I think
So
that's part of what makes it interesting and makes these relationships even more difficult is because, yeah, people can point and say all the things that objectively your dad did wrong, but part of your relationship was you loved your dad and he spent so much time in your...
I mean, even more than love, like, I get the fact that basically, you know, I understand addiction. I understand it personally. And I understand what it's like to be powerless over something. Now, you just don't necessarily, you know, powerless over alcohol or drugs or whatever. You can be powerless over certain things. Like, you don't have any control.
Like certain parts of your personality or the way you're
certain
wired.
things, human beings can be basically possessed by things. Like
pursuits.
Absolutely. And when someone has no control over something, which it was very obvious to me, like I was saying very early on with my father about certain things, he was obsessed by certain stuff. He had no interest in anything else. He only had interest in what he was interested in. And when he was interested in it, everything else just went. And it was just, this is what we're doing. All in all, like, I've lived a very rich life. I've basically I've seen it from very many different angles. So it's not like, you know, I'm some fucking victim and this is like, oh, this has happened to me and that. Like, a lot of the book which I've written is basically just been about, you know, I was at a certain point in my life where I just basically had to get a lot of this stuff out. I find it sort of strange talking about people's behavior. Like, you know, I get that to some degree people are responsible for their actions, but some things just aren't that black and white, man. So
I'd say most things.
Yeah.
It's all about the shades of grey that
Yeah.
I think we're talking about. It's what makes it interesting. It's what people can relate to as well. I mean, in a lot of ways, it'd be easier if it was much more black and white, where you knew what was right and what was wrong, and that was very clear. But the reality of relationships is they are so complex. So how did he receive that news when you said, I'm not playing anymore?
Well, not well. It wasn't going to be accepted as a valid reason to stop playing, me just saying that I don't want to do it. So I had to concoct and pretend and act like I had an injury to be able to get out of the situation that I was in, where I was at. And then when I came back, because I was overseas, and we came back home, and then I had to sell the lie. I had to get the injury looked at by physios and doctors and whatnot. So I was sort of limping around, pretending that I was injured. And then the injury actually started hurting. The fake injury actually started hurting. So I was just hobbling around everywhere because I actually couldn't tell whether it was actually real or not. So then I had to go get another opinion from another doctor to actually get it looked at to find out actually if this is all right or not. So it was basically bullshit on top of bullshit on top of bullshit on top of bullshit. And you get to this weird world where you're like, I don't even really know what's real anymore or where I am. So when you're talking about deluded and people telling themselves stuff, like I'm an expert when it comes to that.
Yeah, well, the mind's incredibly powerful as well. I suppose if you spend weeks trying to convince everyone that you're injured and pretending that you are, it's not too far-fetched to imagine that injury could actually appear.
Yeah. So, yeah, and whilst all that was happening, the underlying issues were remaining unresolved. You know, what was actually the issue and the problems were not being looked at while the fake injuries were being attended to.
What were the actual problems?
Well, again, like we're just talking about, you know, 24/7, man. 24/7. So that's the backlog of that.
But by that time, you were really conscious of it.
I mean, you're just at a point where it's just like everything's fucking collapsing. There's an internal sort of like tornado basically brewing inside of you that's been started from a long time ago. And it's just, you know, that. And then no words for it, no one to speak to about it. That's just sort of basically passing through, yeah.
And how did that come to a head? When did you start erupting?
Once I started drinking, everything was just coming out. Everything. And it was great. And dangerous and scary and wild and yeah, everything would just basically just come rolling out. It was a very, very open book when I drank.
How old were you then?
Well, I started drinking when I was 16. I think I had my first drink. And then, but basically once I got back home from being away, then drinking became more of a thing in my life. Ever more so. And then, very quickly it was 24/7. Another 24/7 pursuit.
Back in a cycle.
Yeah. And it was
another extreme environment.
Yeah, exactly. It's familiar for me. And it was felt like home.
Did you know that you were trying to recreate that feeling when you were doing it?
I didn't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
I still don't really know what I'm doing, man. It's easy. It's not easy, but it's easier to be able to look back on certain things and be able to sort of, and piece this stuff together. But it's like, yeah, I've always experienced my life in delay and be able to make sense of stuff sort of once the door hits me on the arse on the way out.
Hindsight's great, isn't it? What happened to your relationship with your dad when you stopped tennis and started drinking?
We became separated for some time and then we came back together drinking. So we became basically like father and son when we drank about, 3 or 4, 5 years later down the track, because his life, basically once we dropped out of that tennis world, both of our lives just sunk. And we reunited and were like anointed as this sort of like father and son duo. And we basically just used to, drink with each other and sort of commiserate over this shared misery that we both sort of enjoyed. And I don't know, it was...
So it was like a drowning of the sorrows.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah, I mean, that makes it sound very miserable, but it was way better than tennis. It was actually, it's not as doom and gloom as it sounds.
Would you be honest with each other?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, there were certain things with Dad where he didn't have the ability to be able to
explain.
Yeah.
Did he give you some answers or a feeling of a bond that you didn't have before that?
Did he give me any answers?
Yeah, about like...
I didn't really want any answers. There's no, when you sort of know someone, it's like, I'm not looking for any answers. I'm not even really looking for, but what I found as close to a father as I could get. And that for me was a lot.
In what sense? Like, what did that look like?
It looked like a relationship without like dreaded fear. So there was closeness and an intimacy, even though it was sort of like manufactured one in a dysfunctional type of way. It was very real. It was very real to me. And I'm glad in a way that we sort of both destroyed our lives in a way together. Like that. It sort of seems fitting in a weird, warped kind of way. It seemed fitting.
So you felt close to him during that time?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And you felt like you had a father for the first time, even though it wasn't in a particularly healthy environment?
It was healthier. Again, it was much healthier than the environment that we'd been in before. So again, I've lived in alien land, man. So what makes sense to everyone else doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, healthier to the wider 99.9% of the wider public. But to me, that was the issue.
Why was it healthier?
Well, because the tennis thing was the issue. That was the main problem. The drinking basically just made us more like father and son. So yeah, absolutely, sort of for me better. Yeah, just been basically layers and layers of dysfunction. So it's like, who's to say one layer of dysfunction is better than the other? Like most people would take that view, but I certainly don't, because I know how it felt and I know how it sort of was.
So where did that go from there?
That's a good question. I got sober and sort of just came to, best way to put it. And then there was a lot of like me sort of opening my eyes to what was actually going on and not being in this deluded state and seeing the wreckage and the carnage of what was basically around me that before I couldn't see. It's like a fucking tornado just went through my life. And I was able to sort of see, and then it took me a while to be able to make sense of what was going on. And then it became very clear to me that I couldn't tell whether my father had actually been, because he was always very eccentric type of person, but I couldn't tell whether he was always like the way that he was after I stopped drinking. I couldn't really tell. And then it became clear to me that he was actually more unwell than I realized. And then his health declined very rapidly, where he sort of has dementia and such. And
so how many years were there with you and him like that?
That's a good question. Maybe 5, maybe 7, maybe 3, maybe a week. I don't know. I don't know time. I don't know dates. That's not my forte.
Did it feel like a long time?
Yeah. That period that I'm talking about now, because I remember my life in like, I've basically lived 3 different lives. That's how it completely feels. It feels like I'm talking about someone else ultimately, because when I drink, I ultimately just become someone else. Like it's not, I don't know where this guy goes, but he's elsewhere. Just changed dramatically. Like I'm kind of introverted and shy and quiet to some degree. I may not look like it now, but I feel more comfortable than basically just talking to some person on the street and trying to like speak to them. I just don't enjoy that. I don't know. I feel fearful and nervous around people. I don't like socializing. I don't really enjoy people. I don't really get them. They sort of, again, because socializing wasn't very
ingrained.
Nah, it wasn't for me. So,
it's a hard thing to give up then.
What's that?
Drinking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of yes and no. Yes and no, yeah.
What was the journey with stopping that after years of alcoholism?
What was the process of that? I basically plummeted into a 12-step program under sort of happenstance circumstances.
This is like late 20s?
Nah, I was about 31. Okay. So I went in there when I was 19.
Yeah.
I went in there when I was 19 first. Someone took me in there. And then later on, I was sort of... I sometimes would go, sometimes, but sort of just not ready, too young.
And was it always alcohol for you?
Yeah, that was the main thing.
How are you getting through life at that point? Like, how are you paying bills and stuff?
I was tennis coaching. Yeah, I don't know. I sort of like plummeted into this room, and I realized that these people were just basically. I felt like everyone in this fucking room was going to get like arrested. It just seemed, it seemed completely insane that people were this honest. Like I literally felt like you people are going to get fucking jailed for this. Because it's just raw honesty. There's no fluff. They're just brutally honest. And not brutally honest because it's cool and it's great and it's vulnerable and it's trendy. Like it's fashionable now. It's like these people are basically foundationally honest because the bullshit has been beaten out.
They've been stripped back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's no pretense about these people, and it was a very real and raw place, and I was in a very real and raw state, and that, it's like alchemy sort of transpired some miraculous way.
What did it do for you?
Completely catapulted and changed the complete trajectory of my life. I'm actually like here.
Yeah. Sober,
semi-sane, and like functioning. It really is like just being through a fucking total tumble dryer. The more time that I sort of get away from a life that I've been removed from, I've gotten through by the skin of my teeth here. So,
yeah, like this is a miraculous result.
Yeah, it's not necessarily by my doing either. It's the same before with the same thing that happened with the tennis, where it was like I'm done. There's something sort of snaps and shifts, or I don't know how you put that.
So when you were there and you were witnessing people being so upfront like this, was that the first time that you were actually speaking out loud some of these things?
Yeah, what connected for me was like, these guys are just acting the way that I act when I'm drunk. Because when I was drunk, I would just be honest. And I was like, there's something about me that realizes like, okay, I've done the right thing in the wrong way. And I'm like, all I've got to do is just pretend like I'm drunk. And then once I sort of exercised that muscle, I realized, like I'm speaking here, it's actually not hard, and you're not going to get arrested, and people aren't going to fucking put your head on a stick. And actually everyone applauded you for your like ridiculous behavior. Well done. You know, I think because society is just saturated in fucking such fluff, such toxic positivity and vulnerable and mindful.
Like posturing.
Yeah, it's just all nonsense. And it's like, you know, I'm not a mental health advocate. I'm happy to talk about like what sort of happened to me and but I don't subscribe to a lot of this stuff. Like, you know, I just think it's actually really harmful. I think it's really, really harmful. Something happens with men's mental health, and then society just barks at men like they've got to open up. Open up, you've got to talk, you've got to talk. Well, the irony of that is that a lot of the people that are basically doing the barking are fucking shocking conversationalists themselves. Like they ask boring questions, they give rehearsed answers, and don't really tend to fucking listen at all. So it's like, the bigger issue that you have, the more there's no one there to really talk about it. And it's like now, you know, there's trending themes where it's like if your problems fit in with the hashtags of today, like anxiety, depression, trauma, all issues aren't treated equally.
Like whatever's on
but
trend.
what about your fucking sex addiction, man? Like, go outside and talk to these people out there about that. People head for the hills, man. So if you've got like real deep, and again, like, there's nothing wrong with basically going and do some meditation and doing some yoga and that type of stuff. If your life's doing okay, keto diet, whatever the fuck it is, no worries. But these people who have like significant, deep, real problems, it's like, there's go where with what? And it's like, you can't really talk to anyone about anything because you're just going to get sort of blamed, shamed. So why would anyone do that?
Do you think that's the case with professional help as well?
I think therapy is, again, it's just becoming like, so now with therapy, right? It's like, it's in trend, it's fashionable. And now with these stylized Instagram videos that these like soppy dudes are making where they just can't wait to go, like there's too much sympathy in people's sympathy. Like, so if someone's trying to be sympathetic towards you, like it kind of feels offensive because it's like, I don't want to be fucking pitied, man. Like, I'm just trying to be like genuinely honest, and not because I'm trying to impress you. I'm not trying to do anything like that. But now it's like become this thing where
people are trying to be seen to be doing the thing.
Yeah,
rather than just like genuinely doing the thing.
There's no, and that's why even like doing this stuff, I don't really like giving people what they want just because they want it. And it's like, there's no sacredness to it. There's no realness to it. And to get any realness, you got to get as far away from normal people as possible. That's just the order of the day. There's a superficiality with society. And that's why a lot of these issues that I had, it's like, well, no one could really give me anything or do anything with them as much as I was basically trying to see people and do this and do that. It was like I had to go basically down, and I'm very lucky that I basically got somewhere where there was some realness about it. And just when there's a place with some realness and some genuine truth, I mean, it has the capacity and capability to be able to radically transform someone's life. So, and I don't subscribe to any of the stuff that's basically around, because I know kind of it's done with insincere intentions. I know people who I've been with them, I've been around them, and I've seen these people go down. So I think it's these like spiritual charlatans and stuff like I've got a real issue towards.
Man,
So
when you're talking about life coaches and gurus and anyone who's selling resilience, or they're looking to make a buck out of manipulating people who are vulnerable and who are looking for answers of this is how you can fix your life and just buy my program or whatever, I think it's an absolute scourge on the earth. But one thing you did say there was that being in that environment with other people who were at rock bottom, who had nothing left but the truth, that did help you.
Yeah, absolutely. You could even break that down to the point where it's like, I was actually just able to say something without anyone saying anything back. In these rooms, for whatever reason, it is set up where a human being is actually able just to say whatever they want, and people clap and don't say anything back. And if that was set up differently, where we could have a chat like this, that wouldn't work, because I can't, again, it's like men have become so sort of sensitive to not want to be seen as a wimp or a wuss. It's like even the smallest bit of someone saying something in the wrong way, it's like, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Because there's this thing where it's like, you know, men aren't supposed to be a certain type of way. And I've seen it happen time and time again where people just have, they're ill-equipped at having certain types of conversations. Like they don't know how to have them. They don't know what to do. And really it requires it for to be set up in a certain way where there's no feedback. So it's just basically being able to have the freedom to state something raw as.
What you're talking about there, that holds weight in the context of trying to be there for a mate or a family member or someone who comes to you. And the best thing often that people receiving that can do is just what you've said, is just say nothing. Just be there and hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone is, again, and it's not like I'm saying is a lot of people aren't being malicious by responding, but human beings respond, they reply,
we have good intentions.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But in a certain state, when someone just puts like you know, having third-degree burns on you and then someone just rubbing up against you.
Yeah, trying to help.
It's like, no, I don't want that.
I mean, you being there and being around other people who are also there and them talking about it and you having the space to talk about it, even if you're not directly talking to each other like that.
Exactly.
Seems like that has been instrumental.
Exactly, because also what I was able to do is I was able to listen if I wanted to listen. And the rules were set up in a way where I don't have to do anything. So there's too many rules and regulations and stipulations and shoulds and shouldn'ts in modern day culture. And that's an imprisonment to a human organism, essentially. People aren't made cardboard cutouts. They turn into that by just being brainwashed into society. Society makes them into that. And like, yeah, for me, like I was very lucky again because I'd been bombarded with stuff. I rebelled, and then I was in this weird state where I was like, all right, I need something. And then I had another world to be able to go into. Because most people have just had the speaker tape playing in their ear their whole life. So how else will they know any different? There's nothing else for them to go to. That's it. So they've been wound up like a toy soldier, and now their life is just basically living that way.
How are you here today?
I don't know. Because I haven't done anything. I haven't like exercised my way in here. I haven't meditated my way in here. I don't know. I was broken. And that for me seems to be the foundational thing. It's like just being completely smashed into smithereens gives a human being an opportunity. And then if they're exposed to a certain type of environment, which isn't the wash that's out there, then they stand a chance. They stand a chance, yeah. And that's basically right place, right time for me.
But that environment was crucial.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
How much time do you spend in that?
I'm going to there after this. Man, I have to, because for me, it's like breathing in there. It's a pocket of air. I feel like this is alien land for me. Because again, like I'm saying, I can't go out and speak about some of the stuff that I've been through here. Like to who? About what? And also people got lives and jobs and Married at First Sight's on later tonight. Like they've got things, they've got real lives and dogs and go to the beach and have...
Sure, but there's also, you're talking about how much it's helped you to go to AA and be there and hear people talk.
Yeah.
And I get what you're saying, that is a very particular type of environment which is useful. But the whole point of this show is to try and create a space which isn't a bullshit, preachy, judgmental space, and it's not trying to explain everything away or say like, oh, the bad thing happened and now you're cured and it's all good and we all rode off into the sunset. It's for someone who is in a place like you're in, or so many people have been in, I've been in, who want to hear, like you do in A, want to hear someone else. And yeah, we do it in the format of an interview, but they want to hear someone else who's been through something that they can relate to. That no one's going to argue that you're not being genuine in the way that you're speaking right now. And so I think there is a big benefit in someone listening and hearing someone like you talking like you're talking now, which is totally honest. And so the point is trying to create more spaces than just AA. I don't think it's impossible to have some of these spaces that maintain that integrity that they need to have, that can be genuinely helpful to people. And I don't think there's nothing that can help people when they're in those spirals and in that darkness, because you've just said that that's the only thing that made a difference for you, was being able to actually be honest and hear other people talk.
In a very set up type of way, in a very almost unhuman-like situation, where, again, it's like literally like primary school, where it's like, okay, I'm talking now, you talk. Because if you just let human beings be human beings, exactly what you're saying, we're posturing and self-image creation and trying to monetize off something, that comes in the door, man. That comes with life. That comes with that. So as much as you can have great intentions and say stuff, show me where that is. I've never seen it. I've never come across it. As long as that's... yeah, I mean, man, it sounds great, but I don't buy it.
I'd like to hope that it's this show.
I know, but hope is a real, like, I mean, I know what you mean with the shows, and because I was just reflecting on something recently where I was like, something, you know, I think, yeah, if something catches someone from the side and they're in a certain state that can very much impact their life, but then they need somewhere to go. And I don't see anywhere to go. I don't see where do you go? There's nowhere to go. I've looked, and the one thing that's great about me, I'm saying after this, I've got somewhere to go. So I'm very lucky that I kind of have these issues, because if I just had the standardized ones that are sort of topical and trending at the moment, I'd have to go see a shrink.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I got sort of prescribed that as like, all right, man, like 45 minutes a month and we'll see you back here like in a month. And I remember walking out of there being like, is this like, are they crazy? Like, they're letting me go. Like I've got to walk around with my brain unplugged for the next how many days? And it's like, and that's actually a good healthcare system, like in comparison to the rest of the world and that. It's like, so it's like in reality, it's like this stuff sounds nice, but in reality, what?
In reality, you need the access.
Absolutely.
You need to be able to, on your terms, say, okay, I need to go.
If you want to go to the gym right now and you've got a 24/7 gym, you've got somewhere to go. That's what I've got. So
that's what we need.
That's what I mean. Like I can actually go there.
Yeah.
And then from that, I've just straightened out. I've just by actual exposure.
How often do you go?
As much as I need to go. As much as I need to go. So every day.
Oh, really?
Nah. Like
how much do you talk?
Also, the stuff that I'm speaking about, I'm not supposed to be speaking about. This stuff is under.
Says who?
Well, it's part of what I'm doing. This is underground stuff, man. So I don't want to get too much into specifics about it, but I just know the fact that you're asking about my life, and I'm prepared to answer.
That's something that's worked for you to straighten yourself out. Is being able to go there.
Absolutely.
And I think the access point is incredibly important to that, because there's so many hoops to jump through to access, like the typical go to your GP, go see a psychologist.
The pub's a self-help group. Like these places, football clubs, are self-help groups. If you're reading a self-help book, people are like, good for you, like, well done. But if you tell them you're going to a self-help group, they're like, what? Like, they're really weirded out by
That's not changing?
Nah, it's changing slowly. But it's like, again, and it's changing even like, it's hard to explain, but especially in Australia, there's a real sort of, and that is changing as well with the sort of binge drinking culture and that type of thing. But, I think there's also some sort of stigma around people basically who are in, who don't drink or who are in these types of programs. And I genuinely don't care about any of that, but I just find it a weird thing.
Like, the judgment's still there.
Oh, I just find it weird where basically everyone's into self-help and whatever, like meditation and this and whatever that is. But then when it comes to like going to a self-help group, or that's like, well, I'm not that bad.
Or it's not trendy to say, oh yeah, I go to AA,
that's right.
or I go to GA,
That's
or I
right.
go to
Yeah,
NA.
that's what I mean, because it's
Right.
it's fashionable. You're turning it into designer jeans. That's all this stuff is, and that's what I mean. Human beings can't help but do that because we're living in that type of society, and it's like still it's done disingenuously, so it doesn't really do anything. It's just entertainment.
I mean, it's not always done disingenuously though.
Oh,
I mean, you're here today talking about it and doing it for free because that can help someone.
no, I'm not doing it because that can help someone. I don't do anything because it can help anyone.
Okay.
Like, I think that's also not. I think help is also a real issue. Like, if you just come here and sort of be selfish to the point where just say what you got to say, that's it. Don't try to fucking help anyone. Don't try to give them, here's your 5 steps and do this. The help is the issue. As I was saying before, when we're having these conversations, people try to help. And they're like, dude, I don't want your help. I'm not here to do help for anyone. I'm here to speak about myself. This is my book. It's there. If people want to read it, read it. If they don't read it. That's sort of it. I don't like this whole self-image of like I'm trying to save the world and help people stuff. I find that to be really, again, it's just more layering of the same theme of what we're speaking about. I'm doing this for me. If I got nothing out of this, I wouldn't be here, full stop. And I think that in itself is like, this guy's not really trying to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because everyone can't help but sort of come in from that particular...
But it's the element... I think you can help it, because I think it's the element of telling people what to do, or saying, okay, here's my experience, therefore that should be someone else's experience, or like, here's the guidebook based off what I've been through.
Don't listen or do or any of it, because human beings are they are individual people. Yeah. Like, what works for me will kill someone else.
Yeah, but you're not telling anyone else to go do that. That's the difference.
Yeah, absolutely not. I wouldn't tell anyone anything. I find it sort of, again, it's like, how obnoxious and self-righteous to tell someone something about themselves. I just find that a very weird angle and position to take, which people just can't help but do. And they do it under the guise of help. No one will question help either. If you go, oh, I'm just doing it to help, everyone just sort of stops there. Like no one goes, no, actually, what are you helping for? What up? Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, it's just, no, as soon as someone says they're helping or they're doing something for humanity, they're doing something for the greater good, everyone's like, applause, leave it alone. And I've got a fucking skeptical eye. I just see through it. Because I can see through my own bullshit as well. I don't know if that makes sense, but...
No, I think I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think I do too. Yeah.
But what is there then for a mother whose son is really struggling and she doesn't want to just let him suffer there? And again, I'm not asking you to tell her what to do.
I really don't know. Like, I think each case is, you know, one person can hear something and then might do something. One person can hear something and react completely differently. Like, help can be taken as like the biggest insult and violation of someone's humanity of all. I don't know. These things are so particularly based. It's like, that's what I mean. When people come in here and act like they've got some recipe or something, it's like, what? Like human beings are so unique and fragile and delicate and like timing and where they are and who they're.
What is it about?
I don't know.
What I know, I wouldn't expect you to know, man. And I guess that's the point. Is saying we don't know.
But it helps saying that. That is a start instead of going, I know. Because all the people that are saying I know, I've been around. I'm like, well, you know. I'm like, actually, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And then I'm like, well, actually, maybe there's something within me that knows. I've realized that there's something inside of me that actually knows. I've gotten in touch with that. And then I've been guided by that. Call that what you will. Because I've realized the fundamental realization that no one else can basically help me or do anything at all has helped me go, okay. And then there's almost something that sort of just takes over. And sort of it becomes very obvious what you should do. Now, I don't know how I've gotten to that. I don't know how to prescribe that. That's what's happened with me. And then it's like that pocket of air and those things in my life becomes, I protect that at all costs, and that's what I do. And then from that, there's offshoots of that. So, but I mean, you know, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. I'm lucky.
But you've learned that about yourself, and that's just as valid as someone else's experience who says,
it's more.
Who has a prescription of, again, their own experience. They say, okay, so what works for you? And they say this, this, and this, and it's very clear. I mean, you're still saying with your story what's worked for you and made a huge difference is being able to go to these meetings, being able to hear others, being able to speak and not have anything spoken back to you. And then developing an instinct or a sense within yourself just by virtue of living through the years that you've lived through.
All of a sudden made sense, yeah. And
that's your experience.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, yeah, I think lived experience is the key with anything, rather than having someone come in here and mentor you into giving you the 5 ways on how to
because that
do the jumping jack.
assumes that whoever is doing that is saying that you're like that person like me.
It's sort of insulting.
It narrows people down to a very black and white. This is a box that you fit in. And you're either this box or this box, and here's the prescription and do that, and then you will get this result.
Also, maybe that works for people. I don't know. But
it does work for some people.
That's what I mean. So, but for me, yeah, again.
It also doesn't work for a lot of people.
That's what I mean. If a human being doesn't genuinely want something and the drive's not in them, how can they not just default to their defaults? People will basically just turn back into who they are by the time they get back to their car. That's how people are, because it's been hardwired in. So change is, it's almost like a dirty word, because I don't know what to say.
Well, look, I think the salient point of this is that everyone is different. You certainly feel very different. Different things work for different people. What's worked for you? How could you say that it's going to work for someone else? I've got to say I haven't had a conversation just like this before, because I haven't talked to you before, but I really know 100% that you're being totally honest and you totally believe in what you're saying, and your experience is your experience, and you've had quite an extraordinary experience in a number of ways, and you're not bullshitting at all about that. And I think that that is worth sharing.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode. If you like what we're all about, support us by following Youngblood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Youngblood Mental Health on TikTok. Every podcast episode is recorded in professional quality video, and they're all up on our Youngblood Men's Mental Health YouTube channel. So please show some love and subscribe. You can find everything there is to know about the podcast at youngbloodmensmentalhealth.com. And most importantly, please share these stories with anyone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.